now? Oh, that's amazing how that just kind of happens. I'll call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, November 2nd at 2 p.m. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be gathered today on the unceded territory of the Sim people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Are there any late items that anybody would like to add to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt as presented? We have an in-camera. Seconded. All those in favor? We have an in-camera after this as well. So anything else up? Adoption of the minutes. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. Seconded. Moved by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Herring. All those in favor? Items 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. There is nothing. Moving on to Mayor's report. On the 20th of October, listened to both the mayors of Lytton and the mayor of Iqaluit on a conference call talking about their respective bad years. Obviously, Lytton released a starter plan for the rebuild anyways. And Iqaluit, if you're not aware, their water tanks cracked and they have fuel contamination from the outside of their water tanks leaking into their water system. And they've been flying in Hercules airplanes loaded with bottled water for 21 days, I think it's hit now. So it's a lot of fun at this particular point, what they're going through. On the 21st and 22nd were 2 days of TNRD, lots to talk about there. 26th, the Legion came by and pinned me with the first poppy of the season, which of course I've already lost, and I've lost one since, because that's how it works. On the 27th, had a long meeting with the local health planning table. It was a great round table discussing the new health planning model that will be implemented across most of rural BC. But also it was a good look at the new model for the clinic. Susan Butcher was there from YCS, and sort of the progress on where we are in the whole sort of medical community in Clearwater, and the shakeout of a whole bunch of changes that are coming down. I met Dr. Sandra again this morning, had a good chat with her at the medical clinic. But yeah, a lot of change happening in both the hospital and the clinic. And that's basically everything I can remember that I've done in the last couple of weeks. So moving on, Councillor Bamford, I see you online.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. And first I want to apologize to council that I'm not there today, although I was there the last two. Both my wife and myself have surgery scheduled within the next 10 days. So I just can't take a chance on getting a sniffle or a cold and have those surgeries postponed again. So I apologize to council. Been a pretty quiet week for last 2 weeks for me. Just keeping up on email and doing some reading, looking at the staff report on workload that we've had and trying to look at things that we might be able to move or not do. And I'll bring that forward to our CEO in the future. And that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzle.
Thanks, Mayor Blackwell. That's where I should bring up that letter. Well, I actually was in contact with Tracy Christensen from TRU, who is looking for support because they're looking for funding to improve healthy aging for older adults in the Thompson Caribou Shuswap area. I, as the seniors coordinator, did write a letter of support, and she and accepted that gratefully, but she also sent a letter to the mayor, who has just received that, who's also looking for a letter of support from mayor and council. So if you guys are interested in looking at that letter, I have it here. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, you can pass that around at the end of the meeting, and if council agrees, they're not really asking anything further than a letter of support. So
yeah, they just,
if you all agree that you like it, then we'll send it out to Barry via, I'll forward it to Barry via email, Councillor Bamford.
Yeah.
Then we can just do that because it's time sensitive.
Yeah, and they're looking to help seniors with exercise programs and being able to get online and get help easily online, where, you know, seniors do have problems with that a lot of the time. So moving on, I'm also the Alzheimer's support facilitator. And of course, we haven't been doing that for the last year and a half. And I just 3 days ago had a really, really long discussion with the Alzheimer's facilitator on moving forward. And we thought we'd be starting in January 2022. But after our discussion, she got in with her supervisor, and we have been given permission to start November 18th so we can have in-person supports with for the people that are supporting their people that are suffering from dementia. So Tara's going to be coming up for the first 2 weeks and sort of starting the whole program up again and reminding people how they can be supported and whatnot. So I'm really excited about that, because the supporters have been really hurting. They've really been needing the support, but of course we couldn't do it. So though I did cheat a couple of times, I did go outside in the field with them. So, I just wanted to say it's really good to see that biomass thing going up. That's going to be nice to see that going. And congratulations to the Best Western. They're finally open. Yeah, that's my report.
Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Herring.
So for myself, not much to update. I just wanted to say, well, extend my apologies for not being able to attend the staff appreciation event. And I wanted to share with all of you that I do appreciate all your work, and I think you guys do an amazing job. So sorry I couldn't make it, but know that my thoughts are there for sure. And that's all I've got.
Same, yeah, I think everybody's on the boat. And kudos to those that organized, especially Megan Sim, who apparently pulled off quite a presentation, or had all the bells and whistles. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Blackwell. A couple things here. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Pretty quiet for me in regards to council lately. The biggest hitter coming my direction was responding to complaints about Dunn Lake Road. I've come to grips, it's ongoing until it's paved. This is just the way of life. And you know, whether they're stopping me at the Shell or Bilo, or going as far as flagging me down on the old Dunn Lake Road for a chin wag while I'm heading out to work. Lots of complaints with it, but for the most part, everyone's satisfied with the answers I could provide them. But there is one or two, I'm sure, that weren't too impressed that I didn't have BA blacktop in my back pocket that day, but they're starting to deal with it, and before you know it, snow's gonna fly. It's gonna be smooth till spring again. So we're buying some more time here. Yeah, that'll help. Secondly, give a shout out to CSS Raiders soccer team. Pretty big deal when a team from where the heck is Clearwater makes it to the big show. Happy for them for that. And due to the rash of publicity on social media, a good, very close dear friend of mine from the Passaic community, also a fellow Raiders athlete from mid to late 90s, reached out, and about 8 minutes later, I had a nice $3,000 lump sum in my account to run up to Mr. Coates that afternoon. So he was more than thrilled when I handed that to him. So yeah, good luck, boys. Best of luck to you. Let's see, third. When I dropped my name in the hat to be an elected official for District of Clearwater, thought to myself, how hard could it be to attend bi-weekly evening meetings? Well, that lasted all of about 2 days till we received our first schedule. 3 years later, and at times spread out like a transparent phyllo pastry, I wouldn't want to change a thing. I thoroughly enjoyed everything I've done over the last 3 years, and it's been one heck of a learning curve. So I'd just like to personally thank the team from around the council chambers, all staff past and present, for the patience, compassion, and understanding during my times of tardiness while I'm at the beck and call of my second wife, CNRL. So I can't thank you all enough for all that. And fourth and final, as we come out of hottest summer on record and jump headfirst into what most people call the season of Eeyore, I just want to put out there, I have an open door policy for absolutely anybody who needs an ear to listen or shoulder to lean on during times of need. Mental health is serious shit, and it's out there, and people turn a blind eye to it all the time. You know, I've been through it myself in the past, and you know, it's real. So I'm a phone call away if anyone ever wants to talk, because we come into this situation, the season and whatnot, so that's about it for me.
Thank you. Well said on all of those things. And yeah, it's been a long 3 years. So,
Yeah.
so how's those evening meetings going?
Yeah.
Are you-
Oh,
is
no,
there a
not very
second
good at
set
all.
I've been completely missing anyways. Hey, we used to get a free dinner out of this.
Yeah.
Moving on to Councillor Sim, go Raiders. Anyways,
It's difficult to follow someone like Councillor Mackenzie, who is always very, very heartfelt, and certainly echoing the fact that we love having you here. You're a big addition,
Thank you.
big important addition. So thanks. And I think that extension goes to echo what Councillor Harrowing was saying about the staff and all of that, and also the staff who did the trick or treat this weekend on behalf. So that was marvelous. Things are going on around town through the district. Drop-in soccer has started, so that's really exciting. The recreational activities, they seem to be really getting an upswing in people. For school district, yes, go CSS Raiders. I'm going to have to leave shortly because the Whitecaps have offered to buy all of the kids new cleats, which are waiting for us at Hand Sport that have to be picked up by 6 o'clock. So massive shout out, as you've all heard, that the mayor, and just being a social media guru, just proved that, you know, social connections actually make a difference. But the kids are pretty excited. For anybody who doesn't know, we've got one grade 12 student. The vast majority are made up of grade 8s. It is a mighty team. It is small but mighty, and they've got nothing to lose. So I think we're going to be really, really proud of their best efforts and the fact that there has been an enormous community sense of support. They've got something to fight for. So that's exciting. So I apologize for escaping. SD 73, we are still desperate for a bus driver up to the Blue River Run. So if anybody wants to know about full-time work, it is there. They are trying to fine tune the ad. Right now it just says relief. Yeah, it'll be a relief when we find a full-time driver because we do have of that. So, and then as for the recruitment and the retention, I think the mayor's alluded to some of the important meetings that are going on around it. And hopefully we will be welcoming a new return of service position at the end of next August. And I want to thank all of you for the support through the recruitment and retention dollars. It was the gal that we took out for dinner, and having her here, so it really did pay off. And when we do the matching, they actually picked us too. So fingers crossed that all the T's get crossed. So we'll figure that out next meeting. Anyway, thank you.
I also want to just point out, I mean, seeing your email and talking to Darren Coates, I think half of the initial money they needed for this trip was raised before it even got there or out there on social media through local donations. I believe, you know, to cite what you're saying there, I think one local parent, $2,400 or something like that.
Yeah, most of it was. And just to share that good news, one of the challenges that all sports teams are facing right now is that when you go away, you can't cram in as many kids as possible into a room. So your room costs are double and almost triple. So it's really expensive. So because of that outpouring, Mr. Coates has been very transparent that it'll all get rolled over into, you know, extracurricular. New uniforms are super important, and those are hard to fund. Upcoming costs for the girls soccer, ideally they are going to also do well. So we've got a pot of money that's going to give future participants in sports some confidence that they won't have to dip into their family pockets. Not everybody's doing well in this town.
There was extra funds, so they have like this legacy fund that they're now keeping for future uniform purchases and other things. So yeah, it's none of the donations are going to get wasted for sure.
No, it is an investment in CSS, and just once again demonstrates how freaking generous this community is.
You're giving me the feels again. Never mind, I know. Yes, so safe drive and woohoo, go Raiders. Councillor Taylor, on to your official report.
Yeah, so I could obviously pile on to a ton of things that Councillor have already spoken to. Really want to thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, for your words. I think a lot of that resonates a lot with people around the table, and yeah, it's great to hear you say that. other thing I wanted to call out was the Legion, and thank them for their continued dinners. Like they sell out every time they have a dinner, and just reflects how important that is to the community, and amazing they give their time and put that on, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And the only other thing I was going to say was just a great community Halloween trick or treat, the cruising treats in particular, different organizations put on. It was great to see so many kids out there and having fun for Halloween. So thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to committee of the whole minutes of the Park and Rec of the whole meeting held October 19th. There's a recommendation. So the Park and Rec committee of the whole meeting held on October 19th be received. So moved by Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. All those in favor? That passes. Committee of the whole reports. Councillor Fizzle.
Yes. We'll see. Next meeting, 2022.
Infrastructure, Councillor Bamford online.
The next meeting is November the 16th.
Councillor McKenzie, there's two recommendations from the Parks and Rec meeting. Yep.
Purchase a new tent in 2022 using the TMX Community Impact Benefit Agreement, which has a remaining balance of $9,509.
Supporting the thing there for that. So you're going to move that, seconded by Councillor Sim. All those in favor? Questions on that? Yeah, there's a nice good job on that report. The second recommendation.
The council allocate $5,000 in the 2022 budget to kickstart the planning of a 2-week-long 2022 Winterfest commencing the second week of February.
Second, yeah, Councillor Sim seconds that. This should be fun. This might be our first big community event since it started. Knock on wood. It's out. It's outside, socially distanced. It should be great. All those in favor? Moving on to finance and audit, Councillor Herring.
Our next meeting is December 7th.
Joint Services Committee.
Our next meeting is November 8th, 2021, which I've indicated I won't be able to attend for personal reasons.
I'd be kidding that I can, but we're going to see what kind of agenda and see if we can postpone that. Select committee reports. Forestry Working Group, Councillor Bamford. Big announcement coming down from the province today, but
Our next meeting is to be announced, and I haven't seen the new announcement yet, but we thank staff for sending out the information to the Forestry Working Group on the intentions paper.
yeah, I didn't really think we'd have anything to talk about, but the old growth announcement today probably will give us something to talk about once they release the maps of the areas affected. Moving on to Trails Task Force, Councillor Taylor.
The next meeting's to be determined.
Thank you. Community Economic Development Task Force.
To be determined.
Recruitment and Retention Committee. Councillor Bamford is on the rep for that. It's a DVD.
As far as I know, our next meeting is to be announced. It hasn't been scheduled yet.
Community representation reports. Tourism Wells Gray, Councillor Sim.
There was supposed to be a meeting tomorrow. I just received the announcement that that's been canceled, which is kind of a shame because that's the second meeting in a row that's been canceled for Tourism Wells Gray. So hopefully it comes together for next month, given the season and its need for recovery. So we're looking forward to maybe getting an agenda and having that looked after.
Okay, Wells Gray Community Forest Commission, Councillor Bamford.
And we don't have a meeting scheduled. It'll be announced when it is, and then new business comes forward to the commission.
Yeah, and I believe that I was at the society meeting a few days ago. That's the one I forgot. 28th. There will be new business coming to the commission in the near future, but they have to get some information for you. Moving on to item 18.1, CAO report. Once again, as usual, large report there. Are there any questions of the CAO or staff on that? So I'll let you do that for a second. I do understand that we're getting some traction on our advertisements looking for utility operator, which is water systems primarily that we need the tickets on, and then the labor position, which is sort of a help out position in there as well. So, anything further? Mr. David?
We have had 2 interviews yesterday. We have 1 more scheduled for tonight for utility operator. We have candidates with a broad range of experience, which is really good, up to level 3 qualifications, which is excellent. We've received a significant response to the labor position for Public Works. And we expect interviews to be done by the end of the week and hiring decisions to be done by the end of the week or early next week.
Excellent. Any further questions or comments on anything in there? Once again, thick report. It's amazing the amount of stuff that goes on in this place, in this organization. Moving on to item 18.2, a couple recommendations there, but I guess I'll let staff, are we speaking to this, I guess?
Yes. To summarize the report, we took a look at all the committee structure within the District of Clearwater. We have a number of standing committees that are committee of the whole, which essentially means only members of council sits on them, from infrastructure to Parks and Rec, finance and audit, and economic development. We also have several select committees that are currently operating, which includes Economic Development Task Force, Trails Task Force, Recruitment and Retention Committee, Select Committee on Cemetery Operations, and the Forestry Working Group. One of the considerations for looking at the committee structure was to consolidate where possible and allow for committee structure with broader mandates to include subcommittee functions, and in an effort to reduce the number of committees that we're having. So for the standing committees, there are a few options council can consider. First, if council wish to have separate standing committees outside of regular council meeting. The second one is council can have the committee function within a regular council meeting. One sec here. I just want you to follow along on page 6 of the report or page 26 of the package itself. So as I was mentioning, council can maintain the committee within the regular council or special council meeting, where council can sit as a committee, consider the topic areas in a less formal way, which is the purpose of a committee of a whole format. The other option is maintain separate but limited number of committees within regular council meeting to consider specific topics only, so a much more narrow focus, or maintain separate, which is what we're currently doing, committee of a whole from regular council meeting or council meetings in general.
Questions or comments? Yeah, Councillor Sim.
Yeah, what is the format? I mean, I really appreciate this paper and the discussion around how to be more efficient, how to be more energized, and then also how to recognize that, you know, we've come a long way, and now this is our next growth stage. I think, as Ms. Grew always said, what do we want to be when we grow up? Well, we're about to leave high school, and you know, this is where we're at. So what I am curious about is what would it be described as a system where maybe you had 2 council representatives with staff who attended, you know, let's say an economic development meeting, and then they came back as a committee of the whole structure. So it didn't always have to be a standing committee, or does municipal government require standing committees?
Municipal government does not require a standing committee or any committee for that matter. It's up to council to create those.
So what I guess I'm trying to get at is how can we, you know, maybe have meetings that don't require everybody's attendance? It rotates through different skill sets of council and shares it out, but can bring it back to that committee of the whole, which you've identified in the report. Is that making sense to anybody?
I think looking at the TNR, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if that's essentially like our select committees, and then we bring them back in the report section. So like Trails Task Force Committee, there's like one council representation and staff, and then if there's anything to report back, we report it back through the reporting section of regular council. Or do you think you mean something more, where it's more meaty part of the council meeting than a report back?
Go ahead if you're.
Well, I think anything, because all of the meetings, they require that sort of meaty substance. But because it's discussed at the council table anyway, it doesn't necessarily require the participation of everybody at a standing committee. It can kind of bubble up the ideas, bring forth the minutes, and then the action items to be debated at the council table.
Yeah, I think looking at the other examples here that on page 5 and 6, sort of other municipalities, is sort of what they do, and then knowing some of the other things that we all other incarnations of council meetings and other organizations we work with. I think committee of the whole, as we use it, is probably a little too formalized. I think what we really need to do, and especially even on this topic that we're going through right now, is we need to do workshops, which are not formal parts of this sort of committee or side, but basically learning experiences. And most TNRD committee of the whole meetings are held the second day after a regular meeting. Very few decisions come out of them, but they're more of an educational experience for council to bat around exactly what you're saying in a lot of senses, which is batting around ideas, getting around a topic that has a lot that you need to contemplate in.
For me, I really like the idea of having the committee of the whole meetings be a part of the regular council meeting. To me, that it's sort of a meeting within a meeting, and I like the idea of having them as needed, because honestly, I don't think we need to just update if there's nothing going on, but typically there's one or two things that are arising out of this. By combining these committees like this, I think we can probably keep the workload to a minimum, keep the meetings to one at a time. That's my take anyways.
Other comments, questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I think and I appreciate that. I'm just wondering if there's room, and especially moving into next year when there's the potential for a turnover with the council, is having that heavy lifting done as part of that smaller committee outside of the council meeting. Getting some of those recommendations, maybe doing some staff direction, and then bringing it back to the committee of the whole. I just think that if we neglect some of that meatier reports and just looking after it, and then bringing the special parts back to council, we may either get really long agendas, which are hard to focus on, or we may skim. And I look ahead to a new council that maybe needs that opportunity to dive into some of those topics and get a handle on it.
Mr. Thomas, you look like you have a thought or question there. Not yet. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Councilor.
Is the mic on?
Have it on. There we go. So can you hear me now?
Yep, we hear you fine.
I just find that sometimes, a lot of the meetings don't have a lot of meat to them. And so we say my words aren't formulated yet. I just like the idea of having a meeting within the meeting so that we can all discuss it. And if we need to discuss it, and if we don't, we can just let it go. But if we need something meatier, there's such a thing as the workshop that you were talking about. So that's just sort of not really formulated yet, but that's where I'm heading.
I think I get where you're getting.
Yeah.
Councilor McKenzie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I like the meeting in a meeting myself, like you had said before too. Sometimes we come in for committee of the whole and we're done in 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And for anything we need to put together, I think we can jam it into a regular council every other week.
Yeah.
Myself.
And there are, we do do get a lot of input from the existing select committees, et cetera. I think we're still going to do lots of community consultation, but I think we need to start looking at this is stage one of reorganization. We may have to look to, like you said, initial comments, a bunch of evening meetings. I mean, we may not go back to full evening meetings. I think we need to be a little bit more flexible on how we do the future, and that's not a decision today, but that's a decision for the next council, things like that. Councillor Bamford, I see your hand up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. If we went to a meeting within a meeting, which I don't have a problem with, versus separate committee of the whole meetings, is there anything stopping us if we had a large number of agenda items coming forward from one of these committees to call a special meeting ahead of a council meeting for that discussion on one of those particular committees and just have that? So if we needed it, we could still have it. If not, they would just be blended into a regular council meeting.
Mr. Thomas, yeah.
Absolutely. So the option, sorry? Yeah, the option to call a separate meeting will still exist if council wishes, for sure. We would have to follow the notification requirements of 24 hours notice prior to calling the meeting, however, which could be relatively identified early in the process when the agenda is being prepared.
Councillor Sim, because I just.
Are you all right? Do we need to
rescue?
rescue? So I really, and I think it's important we get to something that allows us to do the work of local government. As for the agendas that are brought back for the committees, they have been lighter because there's been so many heavy projects on the go, and it's been intentional. But I wouldn't want that to influence our final decision, because this is a moment in time. If we go back to all the other years prior to this, there's been a lot, and it's resulted in this bottleneck of work. So I think we have to be very cognizant of a format that has long-term, not just reflective of our past 8 months, and being sure that we provide a format, especially for new council, to come in and that they can get up to speed. And the very first council, Lynn, you'll remember, they were long meetings. So it's how to educate, make well-informed, as well as being respectful of the work that we want accomplished.
Further comments, Councillor Frizzle?
The one thing I like about it is that we don't have to have a set Parks and Rec meeting that month and then economic development and infrastructure. It is going to be a meeting that's needed at that time for whatever that reason is. That's what I like about it.
And I also, if I'm reading into this correctly, we don't have, it's not the set, but if we have an urgent item for another department, bring it up. And the intention is still that in the middle of the regular 2 o'clock meeting, I would turn it over to whoever has that portfolio, take the chair, and you return it when we're done.
So that raises a great question about how we bubble up information that feeds to an agenda. So it sounds like the idea would still be to have committee chairs that would submit items as needed to the meeting as a whole. Is that kind of the direction?
That's what I'm hearing.
That's, I don't even necessarily know if you, committee chair, yes, because you're going to be taking over the meeting, but it's more, is there a need for, say, Councillor McKenzie every 3 or 4 meetings to be able to come up with an agenda? Well, that puts on pressure on staff to come up with items, whether or not there's a need for it or not. So we get rid of that sort of thing. But if we retain the responsibility of individual councillors to look after a file or a set of files, that if Mr. Thomas or staff through Mr. Thomas or staff, he would direct it to that counselor to say, hey, I've got an item for Parks and Rec or whatever. I'd like to talk about the next thing. Are you good with this? Or you as that lead of that file say, hey, this has come up in the community.
I think as long as that there is a fulsome way to ensure that we are activating the work of a council person into a meeting, you know, and there is some direction. I mean, I have a long list here of things. I mean, I'm looking at you guys going, are you kidding? We need like weeks of a meeting. But in all seriousness, as long as we've got a format that we capture, you know, the information that's coming in our next growth stage, and there is a point for that. But at some point, this will break, that our plates are going to get full. We're going to need time. I love the special meeting, and I think Revelstoke does that, and it's quite. I really like the idea of maintaining committee chairs so that they are still learning about the various aspects and then weaving that in. So I think we're coming up to a great solution.
I think we go with this for now, and then.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we have a tendency to want to know what the perfect answer is before moving forward with the change. And I think we've talked about this before, and we didn't make the change because we didn't know if it was the perfect answer. And so I say we just go with it, give it a try, and we can evolve and edit as we go, I imagine. Like,
Do I see Red sitting over in that corner there?
maybe a little bit.
Yeah, Mr. Thomas.
Councilor, I'm not married to the names of the committee. Those are just ideas. So if we can consolidate even further, I am happy to do that.
I think we name them after sports teams or Teletubbies after this. So that's perfectly fine. Yeah, no. I mean, I'm joking about that because we could make out that's GOSC. Anyways, we have two recommendations. Is there any further discussion on this?
That's our first recommendation.
First recommendation.
Can I just,
Well, yeah, I'm
Okay,
not ready.
Councillor Frizzle.
so what it boils down to with this is if we do this, then we could actually conceivably bring everything to the meeting. Like we could bring ACTEV, we could bring housing, we could bring Parks and Rec, we could bring finance all to one meeting if each one has something to talk about. I mean, that's not likely. I understand that, but
If there was something was pressing for time, you could bring it to the
Yeah.
meeting. Yeah, and I still, I'm going to say this again. We've done them as part of regular meetings, and it kind of pushes us to make a decision. A lot of the discussions on a lot of these things, we do them as regular meetings, as part of the committee of the whole before. And it forces us to make a decision on something with a staff report where we haven't actually had the time to discuss it. Let it percolate or whatever. And I think moving forward, this structure will allow us to do, you know, maybe more informal workshops, not that I'm trying to staff, but, you know, have more informal discussions and see quarterly basis or with special guests that are coming like then we're informed, and then we have time to take it away and we can think about it, and then we come to regular council meeting within the meeting to actually make that formal decision.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just discussing sort of the names and that. Again, excellent discussion points and food for rich discussion. I went back to our strategic plan and related to, you know, what is our work going to be that reflects what's we've committed to as a council. So with that, our strategic topics were economic development, infrastructure and asset management, financial management, and healthy community. Housing is in there, but I think that that's a sub factor that weaves in. So to me, I'm not ready to quite move away yet until that's done. And I wondered to put forward even our responsibility as a municipality. So a municipality is responsible for finances. Like that's one of our roles as government. Community infrastructure is another one. We are responsible for water, sewer, and all that other good stuff. We're also responsible for economic development, and that ties into, you know, a lot of the mandates with the BC government and a lot of their direction and conversation. And then there's kind of that fourth pillar, which might be community culture development or social development. So when I went through it, if we maybe fine-tuned it for discussion, finance and policy, I think that there's a lot of work that can be done on our policies. That's an area where we've been we're growing in that area. Under finance would be budget, policies relating to governance. We could also put the new cemetery committee because I think we're going to see some need for policy coming out under that. The second one is community infrastructure, and that would be maybe roads, potentially trails, given the fact that it's about $5 million worth of assets now, parks, and also the sportsplex. Economic development, it certainly is a great place to house our pillars within our community, which is our tourism, forestry, education, health, the pipeline, our home-based businesses, retail and restaurant, the concerns around housing, as well as some community economic resilience. And then if we were to have a fourth committee to house some of our priorities, community culture development or social development, that's where we bring our community groups together and we maybe bring them into the discussion about how they can do some of the community work. Even at the recruitment and retention committee, we were asking, well, who's going to do it? And we looked, well, what are our community groups? Come to the table. Looking to prepare under this for educational opportunities, work and training, volunteer groups, community events and recreation, social fabric and community inclusion, and also includes that social housing initiative, as well as a youth advisory. The youth advisory ties into a lot of conversations that we've been having lately, mainly around the job opportunities that exist in this community. How do we reach our youth? And that's part of our succession planning, is how do we hear from them? Also, we do a lot of planning, but we haven't had them at the table. Now, I know that that's also part of it, but I have put it under that community culture piece. So I'm looking, I'm seeing 4. I don't see 3.
I think all those are encapsulated in these 3 options. I think the nice thing about having broader categories is that we don't necessarily have to tie one topic to one committee as a whole sort of thing. It's all fit in there. If, community planning or, for example, government operations, I assume that would include finance, that would include policy, that would include all of that stuff, right? And so what we call the committee is less important than that we continue to do the work on the strategic plan. And I totally agree we have to tie it together, but naming the committees and separating them out based on that feels like we're just going to run into the same problem we have now, which is too many committees with the same amount of work.
My response to that would be, is one of, I think, the importance of government is that people know what they can expect. When I look at these names, that they're more than what I would maybe be able to explain in the bylaw aisle. So to me, the clarity is really important when our public is looking to see what we're doing.
Further thoughts? Anybody? I don't want to get into a position where we end up basically creating more work because we define things more. Do we want to, if we could either remove the first recommendation or we could table this, do we want to have a council discussion on this outside of this? Basically the equivalent of a workshop. Or are we ready to move forward? Or are we ready to turn this down?
I'm willing to move recommendation as stated option 2 with the existing committees there for a meeting within a meeting.
Does anybody want to second it?
I'll second it in the interests of moving forward. Because I worry that we'll spend more time, again, trying to find the exact perfect thing.
Discussion. Councillor Bamford.
Yeah, I'm in favor of moving ahead. I think I agree with Councillor Taylor and Councillor Herring. I mean, we need to start somewhere. This is an opportunity to see if it'll work out based on staff recommendations, and we certainly have the ability to change it in the future. But it'll give us a step forward at least.
Okay. Further discussions, Councillor Sim.
So and maybe somebody can help me because it's a very meaty report, is what are the responsibilities under each of these committees?
Page
Listed in there.
page 7 or page 27 of the package itself, but page 7 of the report.
So I think, yeah.
So it lists sub-functions.
I will say I'm concerned about the housing. I'm not sure. I'm wondering if that is not a function. And again, I go back to the strategic plan, and I also go back to the economic development plan. It seems that our next step for our community is to do some more in-depth work about what kind of housing we need. If we do strictly housing, that is a big responsibility.
Yeah, and I hear you on that one. I think the new position that we're trying to hire is going to be tasked with doing exactly so. Our two biggest issues are recruitment and housing, and both affect each other. And I can't see why the new economic development person, just talking to the building inspector who has a stack of files larger than has ever been seen in here. Housing is happening. We already know that our housing needs assessment was basically obsolete the minute it dropped. We know that. But I think this new position we're hiring for year-ish, should will just because that's the need.
Would there be any interest in discussion in that third category being community planning and development?
I think the name there is relevant, but I don't think
It is.
anything else.
It certainly doesn't, but what it does do is it puts housing as a subcategory as opposed to a primary function.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Community planning and development. I'm the only concern. I mean, it's in there, and we can phrase it all we want. It's just whether or not something we can do as part of government, or if it's part of something that we have an influence over, or
Those are all great questions, and because we don't know the answers to them, I wouldn't want to necessarily be on a committee there, rather than keep it into a subheading so that we can work our way through it.
I see it kind of the opposite of
Yeah,
what you're
okay.
saying, which is the Housing Standing Committee as a whole gives it its own spotlight. That's how I read that third item, is that it's actually not making it less than, it's actually making a point that we're taking it more seriously.
Right, but most municipalities, especially small municipalities, most of their housing projects are done through nonprofits and not necessarily the municipality. And we take a role in supporting the project, but not owning it. And the applications and those types of things are generally done in that capacity. Certainly not diminishing it, but looking at, maybe what's gone before us.
Councillor Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you could say the same thing about tourism, for example. It's not our business, but it is related to us, and that's why we have it as one of these committees, right? I think housing is the same thing. There is aspects of it that are municipal aspects that are going to be nonprofit and provincial government, but this is to say, when we have a housing issue that affects us locally, this is where we will discuss it, right? Not necessarily that we'll take responsibility for the whole portfolio, is how I read it.
Yeah, and again, that was the purpose in just trying to flesh out, like, I just making sure that whatever path we're down, we're all understanding it. And when we get down there and we had to our first rest stop and go, oh, but I thought there was a view.
So I'm hearing from staff that they're not completely married to the titles of these committees. I think, sorry, go ahead.
Maybe we could, maybe council can consider tabling the report and asking staff to build out what the terms of reference for the three committees could look like to give council a better idea. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's moved and seconded at this particular point.
I certainly don't want to see it discussed forever and ever. I'd love to make a decision by next time. Of course, there's the motions there. I feel better about waiting and just seeing it fleshed out a bit more. It's a big departure. A lot of work's gone in, and can we get past the finish line next time by just seeing what that looks like?
Okay, further discussion, Councillor Taylor?
Is that feasible, that to have the terms of reference for the next council meeting?
terms of reference is maybe a bit lofty. I apologize.
We can certainly try, if not the next meeting, the first one in December for sure.
My only concern with that is we're basically committing to something. Whereas we could, by just accepting this and moving forward, we could actually build it
Yeah, that's a good point. too.
ourselves instead of committing to something that we have to vote on it.
Okay.
Hate to
last
intrude.
one. No,
Oh,
Councillor
Councillor
Bamford.
Bamford, go ahead.
Hate to intrude, Mayor Blackwell. Is your mic on? I'm just having difficulty hearing you. That's all.
I will try to move closer to the mic. I think it's just, we got the new board in here, but maybe we need to do a round the table sound.
Actually, moving closer is perfect. I can hear you fine.
Okay,
I can hear everybody else.
I will yell. Further, anybody else?
I know anybody else, but I know
No,
we
no,
hear
no,
you.
it's all good.
So
Hey,
my
it's-
my last
it's
comment,
Councillor.
my last comment is that number 3 is a huge topic. Community planning, infrastructure. I mean, that's where some of our biggest budgets lie,
Yep.
is under there.
Yep.
Economic development. I mean, these are really big, meaty topics.
Yeah, and it's the first, and on that, and I get that. That's a huge set of meaty topics, but for the next calendar year and the structure that we're proposing here isn't forever. This is the first time we'll actually have shortly a staff member assigned to look after a lot of the issues that would come up into these other than just the CAO position, right? So a lot of this stuff was done off the table of planning and the CAO's desk. With an economic development person in place, it can actually be handled by multiple staff people. So that should help move that forward a little bit. Councillor Taylor.
Am I right in thinking that we could also control the schedule of how often that particular committee comes into regular meeting?
If it's
So if-
all the time, if it's in every single meeting, it's in every single meeting. If it doesn't need to be, then it doesn't need to be.
Yeah,
But
so we
yeah, I
could,
mean,
so we
this is the
could
thing.
balance that through.
We're not doing a rotation of this. I mean, it's as needed, right? And if that need is constant, then that need is constant. Councillor Frizzle.
I'm just looking at what you're saying, the community planning, the infrastructure, economic development. If we have that as one, that is the first time those 3 will come together in one meeting and connecting all the dots in one shot. Instead of having an economic development meeting, we need this there, and the next meeting is infrastructure, and we need to, this way we can discuss it in one meeting about each thing and how they work together.
It's holistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word I was looking for.
Where are we? Okay.
Oh, oh, hey, I have one more question though, just before. You've said that this is a trial, but I don't see anything
No. Everything's a trial because the only reason I would state that it's a trial is because there will be an election in basically one calendar year and a new council can decide whatever they want to do.
Okay, and just to be clear, my goal for the next year is to create a template that new people can walk into and it's easy and they're set up for success. Yeah, look at us. We're practically got nothing on the agenda. I think it was great.
Yeah.
Next.
The only thing that's not on this agenda is more Advil for staff. Yeah. Anyways.
So we can put this in place and we can make sure it's working by the time the next council
All
come
right,
on.
okay.
And if not, we have a template that currently is on file because it's right here from the meeting agenda notes that they can go back or we can go.
Oh, my heart is racing.
I
you
know,
guys.
call the
It's
question.
so hard.
All those in favor of recommendations, first recommendation. Okay, and that passes. Okay. The second recommendation, council maintains the following trail select committees, Trails Task Force, Recruitment and Retention Committee, Select Committee on Cemetery Operations, and the council dissolved the Economic Development Task Force, and the council approved or reappoint a new slate of committee appointments for the Forestry Working Group with revised terms of reference under Community Planning, Infrastructure, Economic Development, and Housing Committee, given the current linkages and focus of the working group on forestry economic development. And that council dissolve junior council charter and work with Clearwater Secondary School in developing a new strategy for youth engagement. Now, this one will get lots of conversation. So who wants to go?
Oh, I have nothing to say.
Councillor Bamford, you look like you have your mouth open.
No, I was just reading it kind of a thing and thinking back on it again. I'm fine for the moment.
You're fine for the moment. Well, that's a comment. Further comments? There's some, once again, I don't have a problem with this recommendation because I think we need to clean things up and there's a lot in here. Things like junior council aren't going to function until that can function again. But you're right, there's a way to do youth engagement that doesn't require maybe.
Totally.
The other thing here, Forestry Working Group may come to life depending on the announcement today on old growth restrictions. Old growth is a broad term that they're using that may affect a lot of the cedar and hemlock in the North Thompson Valley. Until we see the maps, we don't know if it's going to be affected in this area. And I had one more thought. Cemetery, obviously, we want to get public input. We want to wrap that up. Take that off the plate again. I think a lot of these committees, these select committees, we need to, getting away from regularly scheduled meetings, I think is what's critical. That we do them maybe with a minimum sort of, hey, we haven't had one in a while, so maybe we should have one for a check-in, and we send out an email. Is there enough topics for a meeting? Do you all want to meet? That's fine. But if we don't, having meetings for just the sake of having meetings is kind of pointless. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just to add to that, really, like this is not a reflection of any of these things becoming less important for council, but more as looking to do things in a better, more effective way that is more meaningful for the stakeholders too. I'm supportive.
Councillor Sim.
So, and I love the fact that it's a reviewing and it's not having meetings for the sake of meetings. I would suggest that I don't think that the Community Economic Development Task Force ever really has had a proper chance yet. And I think that it is actually one of a really exciting table given who sits around it. It encompasses a lot of people that we may not be able to normally gather. I look at what the Trails Task Force Committee, after reading the minutes and some of the mapping that's going to go through. Well, the mapping actually relates to one of the strategies for this year for community economic development for wayfinding signages. So that's important. And then to have a table where all the people that are impacted, because all those trails link our community, having that discussion. We still have to have the discussion. Who are we as a town? Are we one town center, or are we three areas that are linked together now? We've got people there that represent the forestry. We've got people there that are representing, retail, home-based business. These are important voices. And given that our strategic plan said economic development was our number one, I wouldn't mind seeing this committee just have another opportunity, especially since we're going to be hiring someone to activate the plan that's there and to get that feedback. It saves us having to get those people all together, whether it's a quarterly meeting, twice a year, whatever it is, but at least we've got some good people who've put their hand up and said, I want to participate in the growth of our community.
Okay, further comments, thoughts on that one? Or anything else? Councillor Taylor, Councillor Herring, and Councillor Bamford, did you put your hand up there?
I was hoping that when the new position comes in, that they would kind of manage that engagement and continue that, not necessarily in a committee or task force in the way that we had originally designed it, but making sure we are still kind of finding a way to connect with the different stakeholders and get that contribution through their role in economic development. So I guess that was my underlying assumption, but it was an assumption.
Councillor Herring, sorry.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment as well. And I'm thinking of it more in terms of that new person when they come on, maybe allow them to give us some input on how they would like to see that committee used and formed. If it's something we need to do, then we reevaluate them rather than kind of giving them this framework to start with. I kind of view it as maybe let them decide how the framework should look.
If I remember, just correct me, we still have a housing meeting coming up next week that basically involves some of these folks. Is it not correct? Yeah.
That's correct. November 16th.
Okay. That's just clarification. That's not an answer one way or the other. Councillor Sim.
So on that, because this group hasn't actually had a chance to really be successful yet, you know, they're there. Is it maybe asking them how to translate it and the fact that their voices are still important? Like if we dissolve it, then we've lost the momentum that could be gained by having them. And then I think even as Mr. Thomas can attest, once you come into a community, if we're not hiring somebody locally, if somebody comes in, it takes a while to create that network, whereas there it's already in place. So even if you let that go and say the terms of reference or, you know, just that informal, maybe it is changed, but that is a great group of people. And for another year and then reevaluate. But getting somebody in and getting their feet wet, it's going to take time. And I think we're going to lose momentum. And we have some resilience. We have 2 years of the pipeline. We're seeing tourism that is not bouncing back as strong just yet. You know, and how do we get our town ready and with that vibe? So I really speak favorably in keeping those people. They're great.
Yeah, you guys all have good points around the table with that. And I don't,
Oh, Councillor Bamford, are you having a problem hearing Councillor McKenzie, or is you
I'm
want to
on.
speak, Councillor Bamford?
So I have Councillor McKenzie going ahead, or should I speak?
Councillor McKenzie's going ahead.
okay, yeah, you guys all have good points around the table with that. The way it's termed, dissolve it, I agree with Councillor Sim, it hasn't really had a chance to take off yet. And being the group that there is, I'd like to still see another chance, but at the same time, I'd also like to see what this new job posting can bring to the table as well. But no, I'm not ready to commit to something to let it go until we kind of see what this new job or the new person in the position is bringing in first. So I'm overthinking a lot of stuff for this compared to other things that I haven't thought so much about. So, yeah.
Councillor Bamford, do you have further on that? Or
I have just a question. It appears that the Forestry Working Group would have a terms of reference set up for it, and it would fall underneath one of the larger committees. And if they needed a meeting, the people on that group could have a meeting. So would the task force end up being a similar situation? If that group of people needed to have a meeting, could they not have a meeting underneath the broader category of community planning, infrastructure, economic development, housing standing committee, and have that meeting and report and still report back? I'm just wondering if the same principle would hold true with that group.
Yes, it will.
so yes, it would.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, I'm mixed on that one. So we have a recommendation. There could be an amendment to the recommendation to remove that dissolve the economic development task force. It hasn't been moved or seconded at this particular point. I'm fine either way. I see a value in that group for at least until we have somebody up and running in that economic development position. We do have one more meeting coming. My concern is that we are going to hire a human being to take on a lot of these tasks, and I don't want to get into the position where we have conflicting goals and messages. So I think that person, regardless, is going to end up talking to all the people that are on the current economic development task force. I don't want a council position and a staff position, and that we could end up with a three-legged. So
what would an advisory? What's an advisory group as opposed to committee? Because you've raised an excellent.
The task force seems like it's going to go catch villains.
Yeah. So what is an advisory? Because you've raised such a good point, is the fact that there is some directives and some goals and ambitions within the economic development plan. Yeah. It's going to require some discussion around for the community members. Those people that are there represent a very diverse group. Sitting around the table would allow everybody to hear people's opinions as opposed to one-on-one consultation. It helps maybe illuminate the staff member to come back with recommendations. But I agree with you. Yeah, that conflict. So, Mr. Thomas, what's an advisory committee or an advisory group?
So standing select committees, sorry, are
Mhm.
effectively advisory in its nature, as per section 142 or 43 of. What's the sections?
What? Local Government Act? There's a lot of paper.
No.
Select committee, 142, select committee. So all select committees are effectively advisory in nature.
Okay.
Council is the only governing body that's authorized to direct work of the administration,
Okay.
and that's how it normally flows. But if you look at page 52 of the package, which is the terms of reference for the Community Economic Development Task Force under purpose. The purpose the committee was created was to focus on the development of the economic development strategy, which the economic development officer is focused on implementing for council, for the district. And so with the purpose effectively being achieved, if the committee is to continue, I think there has to be a discussion about what the new mandate is going to be of the committee, of the task force.
If you go to the goals and objectives, they're nice. I like it, to enhance community economic development and identify new opportunities that grow business within the North Thompson Valley. That's kind of important. So,
Yeah. Councillor Herring. Second that? Second by Councillor McKenzie. Further discussion? I mean, it retains the position. We can, I think once we get that person into the role, we have a discussion of how we manage this. I think it's just be very cautious of council that we're not creating three directions. That said, yeah, I think I do like Councillor Sim's approach that it maybe become an advisory board, that it actually still does meet occasionally. I think it'd be better actually versus a bunch of people that we put post-it notes on the wall and we have, serious pointed questions. It could become a problem-solving group or brainstorming group versus a task force right now, which it is. Okay. Councillor Sim.
I liked what you said at one of our last meetings about that forestry working group. Some of the best work was done when everybody sat down at the same table and the synergy started to form. And if council can facilitate that, those synergies and see how things can take, I think that's some of the best work we could possibly do. And I see that for economic development, having those people at the table. So I appreciate the motion that you've amended. Thank you.
Discussion. Councillor Bamford, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mayor Blackwell.
Okay. So recommendation with the amendment, with removal of the council dissolved economic development task force. The rest of it stays the same.
What page is that? Just to.
It's basically a 3 on the, I'm going off of 3 on the agenda. So point 3, we just take it to select committee of cemetery operations / take out the next sub phrase there, I guess is what it is.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
So yeah, so you can select committee on cemetery offers as council select committee on the economic. Just remove the word dissolve. Almost. I think council, or I think staff can kind of wordsmith that sucker. Okay,
Yeah.
if we're good there, all those in favor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Oh, trust me, it's a big discussion.
Well, that was a great discussion. Thanks. All my armpits are super sweaty.
What are you doing? Wear a part ginormous,
I know,
Sweater.
I know. Well, I was probably gonna lose my, well, listen, thank you for that. I have to go drive children.
you have fun.
Thank you.
Point, Mr.
Go
Mr.
Ravens.
Thomas, did you have a
Can council clarify direction on the forestry working group, please?
forestry working group as that council point approved or report legislative was? I think, wasn't that not covered in the last recommendation that we just did that? So the only thing that's all three of those are passed. So as far as the forestry working group, I think if council's all in agreement, we meet as needed.
Yeah.
But because the according to the terms of reference,
Mhm.
it basically already dissolves itself. It needs to be reappointed, but that's stated in here that we need to do. As suggested.
But as you're saying that what's coming down with the government today, that likely a workshop is going to be required to get an understanding, and then maybe the next step would be as a result of that workshop.
I think I think at some point, the people that were now technically former members of the forestry working group, because it really isn't legal at this point, if I'm getting that correctly, Mr. Thomas. It hasn't been because it actually went
Dissolved.
past its mandate. That those people that we send out an invite to them and say, hey, do we need to have a discussion on this? And I think we're probably the old growth, or sorry, the second older growth forestry companies, major stakeholders are probably going to say yes. BC Timber Sales are going to say yes. So we may have to have a meeting on this topic. Are we keeping the forestry working group going, or are we just having a meeting of stakeholders to discuss an issue that may require, like you say, the synergies to happen in the room and them to express their need for political advocacy?
That's
which
right.
is where we come in at that table. So it may be a one-off formal informal meeting, or we may reestablish the forestry working group, but not have a timeline on regular meetings. Meetings for the sake of meetings.
I think it's just as long as we're in tune with what's happening and that there's awareness that any political advocacy, we want to hear about that so that we can further the best work for the valley.
One of those foresters, members of the forestry working group, was in my email at 1:20 this night. So I have a feeling that, but we can't, one or two is not a meeting. Half the people involved in that working group is a reason to have a meeting, or to put the question out, do we need to have? Yep, fair enough. Okay. Escape. Go Raiders.
Safe travels, good luck.
So if I understand correctly, council wants to reappoint members and we send out the invitation?
I don't think we actually do.
Okay.
No, I think what we want to do is once this comes down is to convene a round table
Okay.
and then move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, we can officially leave. If my understanding is correctly, the forestry working group is technically already expired.
That's correct.
From now on, we can have the forestry working lunch date, or brunch date as required.
Sounds good.
Stakeholders need to express it. Formal need to continue to try to create a meeting for the sake of creating a meeting. It's
And junior council?
junior council at this time is gone
Okay.
and can be revived if needed post-COVID.
I see certainly a student voice, and I think that could easily fall under our healthy living coordinator and just bubble up things. But that student voice, they are a powerful, thoughtful group of people that are amazing.
I don't even, Mr. Thomas, you look like you want.
Or council can consider creating a student seat on every standing committee.
That one's tough.
Okay.
I will say just the experience with the school board is that I find that when you have a focus group of where you can ask specific questions to the students, they're really comfortable in that because they have a lot to say and a lot to share, and we have a lot to learn from them. And I think having that council willingness, it really helps them feel a part of the community. I've looked at the fact that we've had 2 applicants to go down to Victoria. And, you know, I just think we need to have a venue so that we hear from them and hear what they want out of our community. I think that they don't necessarily want to follow meetings, and I don't think they want the crash course in Robert's Rules of Order.
No, I don't even want.
I think they want to be effective and important. We go to them. Student voice, student voice.
Okay. We good on that? Got it.
Yes,
Oh,
thank
God,
you.
We'll give Councillor Sim a half second to, well, actually, we're moving on to the backhoe report because we love the backhoe. Ooh. So on page 60, 61 of your agenda. Staff report about the backhoe. There is no recommendation. We've pretty much come to the decision that we need to be looking for a new backhoe, but we have ours back. So if there's any questions of staff on that one, if not, it's back and it's bringing the fun back and functional.
So that's coming back from the shop on the low bed, not heading out again.
Nobody
Okay.
had to drive it
Okay,
down
good.
the rumble strip all the way from Campbell's. So we'll go with that. We lose Councillor Bamford, he's just not on the screen. Okay, that's fine, as long as we, okay, so moving on to item 18.4. There's recommendation of the extension of the appointment of R.E. Lee Dodds as a municipal approving officer for the District of Clearwater, December 31st, 2022 be approved, and that the service agreement with Lee Dodds be renewed effective January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Now, for those, anybody want to move and second this sucker? Okay. Seconded. Discussion, questions. This is a rubber stamp position for the most part, important to the structure of local government, but all those in favor? The second recommendation that a staff be authorized to enter into a service provider agreement with the Municipal Insurance Association to cover R.E. Lee Dodds as an associate member with a cost of $900 to be allocated from the 2020 budget. Planning budget, sorry. Moved and seconded, please.
Moved.
Thank you. Councilor McKenzie, somebody else. Thank you. Councilor Taylor, all those in favor. Apparently talking to the building inspector that's keeping that position busier. 18.5, 2021 fire service capital and operating bud projects updates. Okay. Mike, you got anything to add to this, or how's recruitment going? How about you tell us about that?
It's on the next report.
Is it? Okay, well, you're up anyways for the next 2. We'll go with that.
Just a quick update on all our projects that we've done. Our compressor was installed on Saturday. Have our air packs, and we're practicing with them for the next 2 or 3 weeks before we put them into service, and then we'll dispose of them. And we have our turnout gear, and then our energy efficiency project is just about complete as well, where we changed out the air conditioner that was about 30 years old, and some fluorescent lighting upstairs.
So that's that one. How's recruitment going?
So recruitment is slow. Our open house, we got potential candidates. One's showed up, one's on the fence still. There's other things in life. Our next step is we're going to build a survey. Communications/firefighter position and myself. We've got details. I think we're ready to sit soon. And basically, to get an understanding of why we don't have 25 people. Okay, what are the barriers? What are the issues? It's the time.
It's a great idea.
The time of the day.
Yeah.
Because we practice Thursday 7 to 9. Maybe that's a barrier for some people, right? So we're just trying to put. We're also requesting council help push that message out there as well.
I was just waiting to this meeting and I'll start putting it out. No, seriously, I just want to know where you're at.
No, so, and then some other things that we are doing as well. We posted that we need volunteers on our opportunities section on our website.
Okay.
And actually I got one email from someone last night. Guessing that's where they got it.
Oh, good.
So plus on that side, we're gonna put some more posters out in town. Facebook. That's done an awesome job of posting weekly and all the stuff we've been doing. With that next, find that. We're not disconnected right now.
I think the survey is a great idea because it's basically going to answer a lot. The questions will answer other people's questions when they respond to it or they go. It also gives you an idea of how you start.
Yeah, our last one was to request council and staff and everybody else out there just help push our message out there. Yeah, a great article last week's article. With,
Yeah.
The paper there, all tagged along to our practice. So.
Excellent. Good. You had a question, Councillor Herron? Yeah.
It's like locally and follow a couple pages on Facebook and everything. It's like different ideas, what do you get Comox, they run 3 practice shifts a week. Got the odd department, right? Comox is a fairly larger area.
I seem to remember an article about 2 VFDs amalgamating because they function separately. In the Thompson. So, yeah. Any further questions or comments, Mike? Okay, we all have to come to council with our little red fire hats on next time.
We got lots of those.
Okay, good. Bring them in. We'll take goofy posters, but pictures and get that out there. Thank you for your time. Moving on to item 18.7, John Foster Street Lights. There is a recommendation. Does staff want to talk to this? I think we've talked about this enough, but we're just finally getting around. It fell off the table and we're putting it back. So, 2. And then hydro, yeah, it's recommended by hydro.
Basically, there's an additional cost to adding the streetlights, ongoing operating costs, I would add. And the question is, does council wants us to prioritize that as part of the budget for 2022?
It's going to be in budget. Or it could be if you wish to prioritize that as budget, which is what Mr. Thomas just asked. This came forward as resident complaints.
Everything sold up there, did it not?
Yes,
So
it may become a fully developed. It's not what it was there 4 or 5 years ago. Just move it. Somebody please move it. I think we're gonna have to do this one anyways.
Can I just ask a question first?
Yes.
So there's no actual problem putting the lights up?
Technically, no.
No, so Hydro put those up. It's just a matter of if we want to put the money in the budget. Okay.
Once it's up, we would have to pay for it with all our other utility bills for community lights.
That conversation. Anyways, Councillor Taylor, did you have a further question?
I mean, I believe it's our obligation to
that's exactly.
provide the lighting. I think I assume that's the case. And I don't know when that obligation starts, whether it's when people become resident at those properties or when they just, but
It's a tough one. When somebody's subdivided, before the lots actually have houses on them, in most cases, the obligation is to pave the roads. And so we're obligated to plow snow on the roads down there that don't have any homes on them. So, this is another form of that obligation. But anyways, Councillor Herring?
the only ones we own are the Clearwater States. I think everything else should be hydro, I believe.
Probably is hydro.
I think,
yeah.
yeah.
Not 100% sure, but we'll look into that.
Beyond BC Hydro, I'm sure that Brent's going to tell us that there's a municipal standard or minimum municipal standard or something.
There is, but in order to put poles up that's connected to BC Hydro infrastructure, right? BC Hydro designs it, tells them where it's gonna go and what's required. Correct, yeah. So preliminary design said that they could put 2 poles in next location.
Okay, there you go. There's your answer. Did we get a mover and a seconder on that? Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? We just bought ourselves some streetlights. No pigeons on fire, no nothing. 18.8, 2021 tent purchase. There is a report in your agenda. You get a really nice picture of the style of tents we're looking at here. I like them because they seem like not perfectly square. They're nice and really nice, and they'll have our logo versus an Alberton Logging Company's logo.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
So, are there any questions of staff? Councillor Taylor.
Is this the same tent purchase as under the committee of the whole reports?
Yes.
Okay.
So this report is to clarify which specific tents will be purchased.
Like it? Did you like it enough to move it? Thank you. Would somebody like
I'll
it
second it.
seconded by Councillor McKenzie? We'll go with that. I'd like to say all in favor. Okay, thank you. Oh God, this is getting cheesy. Development of 18.9, development of 37 East property. So I believe on table you have a slightly revised map versus. Oh. So these are 100%.
Oh, it is revised. I thought it
100%
was just
design
legible.
drawings. There is a recommendation. Do you have any questions of staff on this? I think this is. Oh, sorry, right. Never mind. Yes, that we yes, you're correct. Anyways, with what you've got here so far, are there any questions of staff? If not, does somebody wish to move the recommendation? Get to that part. Thank you, Councillor Herrick.
Second that.
Seconded by Councillor McKenzie because Councillor Taylor wasn't fast enough. All those in favor? Okay, and if Councillor Bamford, if you're on screen, we can't actually see you. So we don't know if you're voting or not. Just gonna go with the fact that you're there somewhere. Moving on to water and sewer rates. Other questions of staff on this? Oh, sorry.
Couple of things. The financial component for the 37 East Park was from 2019, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And so I think council may have to ultimately revisit this particular project if the revised estimates are beyond the budget that was initially authorized. I just wanted to flag that.
Correct. I thank you for pointing that out. I thought about that this morning as well. Because how much does a 2x4 cost this week? Anyways.
Yeah,
I guess in that case. So yeah, we expect but that's the great thing about doing 100% price. We get a better estimate. Exactly what we're doing. 1810, water and sewer user fees. Questions of staff, comments. Councillor Taylor, you look like you're getting.
Well, I'm just thinking, I believe Councillor Bamford had questions on this. So I don't know if there's a way we can try and see if he's there. I tried emailing him. But
I think just, I can kind of paraphrase. Councillor Bamford was concerned about differences in levels of reports, draft reports, I believe, that came forward on doing this. And we ended up, if Ms. Shepherd remembers, we ended up with 10%, I believe. But the initial numbers were like 4%, and we actually went up to 10 to increase capital budget. Seems to be my recollection.
There were a lot of discussions and we did end up landing on 5% for water and 10% for sewer
Yeah.
for the 2-year bylaw that's expiring on December 31st.
Okay.
Try and see what he has to say about that.
Yeah, we can skip on to the next item on the agenda. Which is- Oh, we have a staff report on the Dutch Lake Community Center chip silo rebuild. As you can see, there's no parking again. Not because of Bannister training, but because heck, the bricks are going up. So exciting news. Mr. Mayor or staff, anybody there want to speak to what's going on at that end out there? Give us an update. How's things going? When are we going to be back on firing? Not on fire, but
Well, after lengthy delays for so many reasons, it's hard to understand, but
Yeah.
we're hoping to have a fire out there going again 1 year after the original fire. So
okay.
things are finally proceeding.
As long as we don't have a repeat of last year.
No,
we're
we
fine.
hope to be heating with wood chips.
Yes, yeah. That sounds good. And I hear the gym is pretty much
The gym
fully-
is done except for baseball.
Okay, cool. Oh, there's Councillor Bamford. I can see him now.
My deepest apologies. I just had a phone call I had to leave for pre-surgery consultation with Royal Inland Hospital.
Okay.
So it was going over quite the long list of stuff that I have to do to get ready. So I apologize for the absence.
No problem. We just didn't want to lose you for technical issues, difficulties, especially on, because we're on item 18.10, 1810, water and sewer user fees that you'd like to speak to, I think.
Yes, are we on that now, Mayor Blackwell?
That is where we are at. So do you have questions?
Right, so council, the reason I have spoken to Mayor Blackwell about this twice in the past week or so, and I spoke to our senior staff about it. I have some real challenges and some real hurdles in relationship to some of the timing sequences of the reports and reports that we have. I also have some questions around the cost development bylaws, and I have some questions around parcel taxes and what they're used for in relationship to user fees, where cost development bylaws and parcel taxes are usually used for capital projects, user fees are used for operational. So I would like to make a motion that we table this until the next council meeting so that either later on today or another day, council will have an opportunity to have some discussions around this before we move forward.
Okay, I'm going to ask staff, do we have enough timeline in order to do that?
Well, we have 2 council meetings left that we would need to do 3 readings at the next council meeting and adoption at December 7th in order to have it effective for January 1st.
Okay, is that possible? Is that what you're telling me, that that's possible?
Well, we could do it if we draft, as long as the bylaw is drafted for the next meeting, for the,
So I'm going to put this to you, Council. Okay, for starters, I'm just going to leave that on the table. I'm going to stop with Councillor Bamford's comments because I think he's expressed that he's got concerns on this. Does anybody else have any concerns on this? Okay. So if we did, at this particular point, I understand, Councillor Bamford, that you have concerns and that you'd like some answers. So, you know, I'm willing to consider tabling this for sure till you get those answers. But be aware that it would be best if you went straight to staff to have those questions asked if you can. You're hearing me there? Does that make sense to you?
You mean have those questions asked right now of staff?
Well, or after this meeting, just write them all up and see if you can get clarification from staff as to their understanding of how this all came down, and your concerns on it. And then we could move forward with this, if there are changes needed, I guess, at the next council meeting. I mean, nobody else here at the table has direct concerns that they need answered at this point. Unless somebody does in the course of reading this right now. So
Yeah, I guess my concern, Mayor Blackwell, to be quite honest, the report says that it was recommended for a 5% and 4% increase, 4% increase to sewer. Randomly in the past, it was taken to 10. And the report attached to this still says 4. So I have a struggle increasing user fees when gas has gone up 30 cents, when it appears that we broke even with the operational needs and there's money that could be set aside for capital projects in the report itself. And where we have another income that has far exceeded what our expectations were. I just wonder whether some of that income, saving some for reserve, but some of that income could also be used to offset some of the costs that we may have to have as far as an increase goes. So those are some of my questions. And those are council questions, to be quite honest. So I wouldn't support the motion as it is sitting at the table today anyway, because I think we have other options that could be looked at. And I think it's the report itself, the recommendations a bit contradictory to the report that's with the package.
yeah, and that report's a couple years old at this point. I don't think Ms. Shepherd or staff could probably completely answer all of that right now, could you?
And I don't.
I would need to know the specific areas, like where he's seeing the 4%. And I'm not exactly sure about the conversation behind it. I know that resolution 291, 2019 was for 10% for a 2-year term for water or for sewer rates, and resolution 292 was a 5%. We could go back.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm not sure about the conversation that took place around that at that point.
And it in my sort of vague recollection, because it was a long time ago at this particular point, is that it was to start building up reserves a little bit because we're completely drained out on those reserves. And I think Councillor Bamford in his conversations earlier was that was a suggestion of former Councillor Heisterman to basically, instead of going recommendations, to keep.
Yes. What happened was originally anyway, the report came in and Councillor Heisterman just sort of said, well, let's make it 10%. So the first 2 years, it kind of went to 10%.
So that was a decision of council to make it go to 10 and 5. So council at that time did make that decision. It wasn't.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. And my other question is, I guess.
It wasn't, we went above what the report asked at the time.
Right. In the report we have attached on page 101, does the recommendation there is 4% increase for sewer. So even the report we currently have in the package is still looking at a 4% recommended increase for sewer versus a 10% increase. So I guess one of my concerns is, do we still need to go there? Do we have other options, given the price increases that the public are facing anyway? And giving that appears that we have a bit of a surplus in those funds right now that could be used for capital, which is another question. Where do we want to go with this, to be quite honest? I mean, I could live maybe with the original report, but like I said, I struggle looking at 10%, which was a random motion back in 2017 or something.
Councillor Herring first.
Yeah, Barry, what I'm seeing is that's under the section other rate options considered, which means it was considered then, but it wasn't accepted then.
5 and 10 or
The 5 and 4 that Barry's referring to on page 101 of the agenda. So that was considered in the past, but not accepted in the past. I'm much more inclined to go with the current rates. I think we need to plan for the future with this stuff, with a 200 house subdivision coming up and all of these projects we've got on the go. I think we need to have some reserves in the bank for sewer and water.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We have some reserves there, and there was additional money put forward for available for capital this year. But those are still small amounts when it comes to how much the kind of capital investments for water and sewer would actually cost. And that money's not going to go far.
Well, yeah, nobody likes to raise any prices on anything, but I think this is a proactive thing to do, especially with subdivision and everything that's, yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Okay, good, great.
Everything that's coming on down the pipe here in the next, say, year to 2 years, maybe longer. I think it's the proactive approach to do that. It's not unreasonable looking at prices
The
here.
percentages are high. Anyway,
Mhm.
further questions or comments? Councillor Bamford?
My only final comment is I wasn't particularly expecting support on this, but I have to bring it up. If you look at the report itself and you look at the infrastructure report, those recommendations are based on the infrastructure report that was done prior to that time. And that's on replacement costs and everything else. So I realize the aspect of built-in reserves. I've talked about reserves when the pipeline goes through in the past. So there's no use talking about that again. But most of our infrastructure so far, we've been very lucky on grants. I again struggle with looking at a report that's raising it 10% every year for a major number of years, when indeed we don't know what grants we're going to have and what those replacement costs are actually going to be. So it just seems to be kind of random, and I appreciate reserves and everything else. And I look forward to a couple of years when I have the ability to build reserves quite easily. But I have to bring it up because that's my conscience, and I still struggle with some of the stuff that's in there.
Fair enough. But you did bring up a point. We currently, I don't believe, qualify to reapply for the next grant because we have to come up with a water conservation plan. So there's always something. Okay, I think we've exhausted discussion on that. There is a recommendation. What is the desire of council? Okay, moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you.
And I'll recognize as against.
Yes, would you like to? Yeah, so noted that Councillor Bamford wants his vote recorded against. Already touched on 18.11 Dutch Lake Sewer Community Center silo chip. I think even Councillor Bamford was in here. So we saw that the bricks are going up. We have no bylaws, no correspondence response required. At this point, we'll get the letter to Ms. Councillor Frizzle and myself received out there by email. We can have a read on that. Information items, Raft Mountain Skate Club. If anything here twigs, raise your hand or speak out. Paid leave for workers. CN CEO retirement. Are you taking over the position, Councillor Mackenzie? No. Good.
Yeah, for the money, yeah, for the money.
FESBC, circular rebuild 26. So no notice of motion, no other business. Comments from the public. Hello, public. Any comments, questions, anything? Thank you for coming out. Sorry you had to wear your mask through 2+ hours of all this. Anyways. We do have it in camera, so there is a recommendation that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 1IK of the community charter. Discuss matters relating to the receipt of advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, negotiations, related discussions respecting proposed provision of municipal service that are at the preliminary stages, and that review of council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved. Move in camera.